You're doing very well. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
I listened in to most of your last meeting here.
We broke into the secret stash.
There's water over there.
You can see everything. It's nice to have tables. And
And then I was like,
Debbie keeps us on the video this way. Oh, you see feet, I can do this.
Okay, I should tell you this something.
Keeps us
My
out.
feet are moving around,
No,
so
you won't see yours.
no, I promise I won't keep it. So I told you to tell me.
nope, just good old Solomon County.
So we're gonna have some. It's really so close. And all of a sudden, my stretch. I want to lose half down. So it's just really tight.
Okay, welcome everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. This is the Sullivan County Budget Committee. Today is Wednesday, May 22nd. Today, Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024. It's 2:00 p.m. We are following a meeting that just concluded with the county's budget committee, an organization or a committee that deals with elected official salaries, and they will report out during this meeting here in a little bit. So we'll start, as we've done in past years, with the budget message from the county treasurer, and she'll read that into the record. And then we'll hear from the compensation board. And eventually we'll get down to where we hear from not only our own departments, but the public, and then talk about a variety of things. And hopefully at the end of the published agenda, we'll have some time to talk about the longer view. As I said in a memo I sent out the other day, we will have a balanced budget today, but the next 2 or 3 or 5 years are a bit more problematic than they've been. So we hopefully can talk about that at least and get started on that subject. So with that, does anyone want to say anything before we start on the committee or the commission? I'll just ask. Okay, well, having said that, then we'll turn it over to our elected treasurer, Sean Blanchard, who will give us her message for the upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you. Welcome and thank you members of the Budget Committee, Board of County Commissioners, and Tillamook County citizens for joining us today for this especially important process. As Budget Officer, I present the fiscal year 2024-2025 budget message. This address will begin with the budget basics, including the purpose, structure, and key accounting principles, followed by a high-level summary of the total budget and significant changes. The Budget Committee meeting has been noticed as required by ORS 294.311(35). The Budget Committee reviews the proposed budget and receives the budget message. Following budget approval by the Budget Committee, another public hearing is held. A budget summary and notice of hearing are published prior to the hearing, subject to strict legal requirements as to the time and method of publication. The Board of County Commissioners is scheduled to adopt the county budget at a public hearing on June 26, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. After hearing testimony, the commissioners may adjust the budget within certain parameters or adopt the approved budget presented to them by the Budget Committee. The budget purpose, structure, and key accounting principles. The budget is a policy document which establishes the operational plan for delivering programs and services to county residents. With the adoption of the budget, the Board of County Commissioners establishes the funding authority for the upcoming year and strategic direction into the future. As a public organization, the budget must additionally strike a balance between meeting current operational needs of the organization and the public as a whole, and ensuring that immediate needs are not funded at the detriment of future needs. In this task, the Budget Committee members must carefully weigh the funding decisions of this fiscal year with the needs required of future fiscal years. The presented budget includes 4 types of funds. General fund, which is the county's main operating fund and is operated at various departmental levels. Special revenue funds, there are 42 dedicated and other funds that are budgeted separately from the general fund and cannot be used for general purposes. The dedicated and other funds comprise $97 million $369,870, or I forgot to change it. Should be 78% of the total budget, and range from 17.7 million Health and Human Services Fund to a 21,000 juvenile trust. Debt service funds. The county currently has one debt service fund, the Road Debt Service Fund, that funds the road repairs, culvert replacements, and bridge maintenance. The library debt service that funded the construction of the main library at Stillwell and Third has been repaid in full. Capital funds. We have 5 capital funds intended for the funding of large capital infrastructure projects. These funds encompass the long-term projects of broadband, radio, building improvement, road construction grant, and courthouse annex. These are projects that require multi-year funding due to the scale and cost of the infrastructure and maintenance involved. Expenditures are appropriated by categories. Personal services, these are the county's workforce costs, including salaries, income taxes, benefits, uniform, and incentives. Materials and services, which are goods and services ranging from office supplies, utilities, fuel, to building and ground repair and maintenance. Capital outlay, which are purchases and projects with useful life expectancy greater than 1 year and a cost of over $5,000. Operating transfers. Transfers between county funds. These include a required public health contribution and several multi-year capital asset or large cost items and projects that might otherwise require the additional incursion of debt, such as vehicle reserve, which is for prior year general county vehicle purchases, computer reserve, laptops, desktops, servers, and other technology that requires recurring replacement, and building improvements, which are large-scale projects for maintaining and continuing the viable use of county facilities and grounds. Contingency, funds held in reserve that can be accessed with budget amendments. Contingency funds are used as a buffer for appropriated expense amounts and the ability to exceed the appropriated amount if the need arises. Unappropriated ending fund balance, funds that are restricted from use in the current fiscal year to maintain sufficient fund balance for the following fiscal year operations prior to major revenue receipts. Tillamook County uses the cash basis of accounting for all budgets. Revenues are recorded at the time they are received, and expenditures are accounted for when paid. Budget summary. The total proposed Tillamook County budget for fiscal year 2024-2025 is $152,040,280. The adopted budget for fiscal year 2023-2024 currently totals $143,414,880. There's a chart below in Exhibit A that shows the adopted and proposed between last year and this next fiscal year. Significant increases in total revenue include Health Department operating fees. Their medical managed care fees were increased $500,000, and they also had a increase in their beginning fund balance of $2 million. The Library Department beginning fund balance reflects an increase of $1.16 million. Mitigation Grant Fund is budgeting an increase of $1.8 million in new state grants. Significant increases in total expenditures. To obtain and retain qualified employees, a compensation study was conducted. The increase in personal services reflects the study and our ability to retain qualified employees, as well as recruit for new employees. Another significant increase is inflation in materials and services. In summary, with all funds considered, Tillamook County's special revenue and capital project funds are making great strides in multi-year infrastructure and capital projects, as well as with growing programs and enhancing public services. General fund considerations. Tillamook County's focus in all budget processes is to continue to serve the community to our utmost given the fiscal opportunities available. It can be assured that the fiscal year 24-25 budget offers the utmost service to the community. I think we copied that one. Given Tillamook County's current fiscal opportunities. To get a balanced budget in fiscal year 24-25, the Budget Committee grappled through lengthy deliberations, pulling threads from every corner of the budget, piecing revenue numbers together to be able to present the community a balanced budget today. Though many great ideas for future funding opportunities were explored during deliberations, the fiscal year 24-25 balanced budget is ending with a draw of $1.2 million from the Revenue Stabilization Fund, a $500,000 drop in contingency, a $190,000 drop in reserves for future July through November operations, and an overall drop in beginning fund balance of $3.4 million. In summary, the fiscal year 2024-2025 general fund budget has been balanced on a $4.6 million depletion of future reserves. The gravity of balancing the budget in this method is understood by the Budget Committee, and a recommendation has been made for county leadership to hold conversations to address the funding gap before next year's budget workshops. The following is meant to be the starting grounds for those future conversations. Budget messaging has warned for several years that the general fund annual expense growth is exceeding general fund revenue growth. In fiscal years 2017, 2018, and 2018, 2019, state timber hit a record high, leaving essentially $6 million in excess one-time funds and a healthy beginning fund balance. In 2024, 2025, those funds have dwindled, largely having filled gaps in annual revenue to cover recurring expense growth to date. Looking forward, the window is rapidly closing on the ability for state timber to provide such excess one-time funding. In March of 2024, the Oregon Department of Forestry passed the Habitat Conservation Plan, or HCP, a plan that is estimated to decrease timber harvest levels by 20%. Oregon Department of Forestry's contract processes allow for harvest to occur up to 3 years post-sale accordingly, and it is currently estimated that Tillamook County has just 3 years before the effects of the HCP will impact the budget. Despite the known uncertainty for future timber dollars, as stated by Budget Committee Chair Doug Olson, the general fund is eating its seed corn for the fiscal year 24-25 budget. In other words, the budget is spending down reserves ahead of hard times. Looking to future budgets, the general fund's additional resource needs will only grow as the county's expense growth continues to outpace revenue growth. Every year, salaries and benefits increase either due to cost of living, bargaining, or step increases. Insurance costs, meaning property and general liability, have exceeded 10% growth year over year. Inflation continues to drive up materials and service costs, and every year the county's infrastructure ages, requiring more and more costly repairs and maintenance. As the discussions for strategic planning, financing, and revenue expansion get underway, be sure to consider the magnitude of the funding gap that will be faced in the future. $4.6 million in excess of revenue in a single year is not repeatable. For the second consecutive year, the general fund message ends with the same request. I leave you all with the request that with any suggestions or decisions made today, pause and think, what about next year? If the decisions that are made today do not work at this time next year, let us all start the conversations now on how to solve that problem before we come together again. Respectfully submitted, Sean Blanchard, County Treasurer, Budget Officer.
Thank you, Sean. I would characterize that as a very realistic and scary in some ways, because you've looked into the future, as we all have done. So thank you. Are there any questions of Sean relative to that message? Without all the details, we'll get to that, but any of you like to ask anything or offer some remarks about her message? All right, thank you. Then let's go to the compensation board update, and I believe you have elected a chair, and who is reporting out on that? That would be Michael?
I guess that would be me.
All right, so please take the floor and tell us what you folks decided.
Okay, the compensation board met with Jody Wilson, the Human Resources Director, and she presented a report. Many questions were asked. And at the end, the compensation board is recommending that the Board of Commissioners approve three recommendations from the Human Resources Director. Number one, that consideration approval of a cost of living increase for elected officials that aligns with recommended non-represented salary tables of 3%, July 1, 2024. Number two, recommend consideration and approval of a cost of living increase for the district attorney's stipend of 5% to keep pace with comparators and the cost of living increase provided by other elected officials. And three, recommend further salary studies and organizational studies of the roles and responsibilities of elected commissioners and treasurer to align salary with the work provided within the county and not necessarily with comparator counties that may have fewer responsibilities. Outside of an independent study, the political aspect of advocating for pay to align with work provided is difficult for an elected official to pursue independently. This recommendation would include our elected officials in future desk audits and classification studies.
All right, thank you, Michael. Are there any comments or questions? Again, we can get into some of the detail as we move along, but anything on general terms from that finding and report?
I would just add for clarification that 5% stipend for the district attorney is 5% of the stipend, not 5% of the salary.
Yes, good point. And for those of you who might be listening in, the district attorney is in fact an employee of the state of Oregon. And I think probably 85% of the salary actually comes from the state of Oregon. And the remainder then is the stipend that was just mentioned that the county provides. And I believe that's true all across Oregon. All 36 counties handle the district attorney in that manner. The actual assistant district attorneys and others are all county employees. So we make sure that's clearly understood on the record. So thank you for that. And so that is your recommendation, and go ahead and take that forward. Okay, I'll ask again, are there any questions on compensation board's findings and recommendation to the full committee?
So I think I understood that those are already in the budget, correct? Reflected in the budget that we have that's balanced. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so, thank you. All right, so let's go down now to our county departments and other funded agencies, meaning there are other organizations that receive county money that appear in this budget as well. So I'm going to ask if anybody representing any of those departments or agencies would like to appear before the budget committee. Including anyone who might be online, we'd be happy to recognize you and hear from you as well. Going once, going twice. Well, certainly if something comes up as we go through the rest of the process, you can be recognized then and ask questions, and we'll endeavor to answer them. So thank you. Then we'll move right along, and we'll go and I'll say the same thing to the public. This is a public meeting. It's been noticed properly. And is there anyone in the room or online who would care to address this committee?
I've only received one public comment, and it is still in the back of the book behind the Fund 122, I believe it was, but it was received for our last meeting, otherwise nothing.
Okay. All right, well, I don't hear any, and again, if the question comes up during our further deliberations as we move along, we'll certainly recognize you and entertain a question. So now let's go to the budget committee, which is the 6 of us. And I'm just going to start, I'll start down, let's just go around and I will go last. And I'll start with Mr. Henson and ask for you to make your overall comments. Anything you want to say about the whole budget, including the work you just finished, as well as the budget that's before you.
Well, first I'd like to thank the county commissioners for allowing me to be a part of this process and everyone involved being forthcoming with all the information. I appreciate that. Thank you. Secondly, this hasn't been an easy process. There's been a lot to look at, a lot to digest, a lot to take in. And I think we all share the same concerns that we have to do something about the future, that going forward we can't, what we're doing, the actions that we're taking, the recommendations that we have made and will continue to make aren't sustainable. And so, as I've continued to say, I look forward to a very robust strategic planning session with the county and determining our future and how we get there.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
I'd like to also thank everybody for allowing us as lay people to participate in this. I want to, in particular, commend Sean for the work that she did on this. There's just a ton of work to put this together, and I really appreciate it, and made it very easy to review and look at. And I want to say that and I've said this in the prior meetings that and Sean alluded to this in her budget message, that what we've done is not sustainable. We've balanced our budget this time, but on the backs of future budgets. And so you've got a new county commissioner, and hopefully you're retaining the one we have now with, if the votes hold up, that the three of you make this a priority soon, because if we're in the same, having these same discussions a year from now, I don't know what we're gonna do, because there's only so much borrowing from the future we can do. So I appreciate that everyone's listened, and I just hope that going forward that this is sort of just a stopgap to get a balanced budget, that the real work, I say, is going forward to fix future years. So, thank you.
I too want to say thank you for letting me participate. It was a little bit of a rocky start, being someone coming from another
From California.
planet.
Split.
And I was gonna make the recommendation that we consider Michael one of our brightest, but maybe I'll retract that, I'm not sure.
I would.
I really commend Sean and appreciate her approachability, and she obviously is doing the job of a finance director, and I think all the department heads I've met have been very impressive, and I've worked at the college, so I'd say the bar was a lot lower there, so I'm really pleased with that. I had a very good discussion, an affirming discussion with HR in my orientation, and I am very concerned about what's being called a rich benefit package and the sustainability. I too want to reiterate that on day 2, I didn't think it was sustainable. And I'm hoping that I would be included in some of the discussions, especially with looking at job descriptions and maybe combining some things and figuring out what really the county does need in the long run. And in addition to the budget strategic planning as well. So I'm very grateful for being able to participate. And I appreciate people's warm reception in Tillamook County. My hat goes off to you guys.
Thank you. Mr. Starr?
Well, I want to thank our lay people for participating. It's wonderful to have a newly seated budget committee. I appreciate all of you and what you bring, and appreciate that you stepped into a very difficult setting and a difficult situation. We had some of these conversations last year at looking down the road and where we would be. And if we go back and look at Sean's budget messages over the last 5 years, we have known we were approaching this. But as government, we typically are trying to do as much service as we can to the public. And we have continued forward providing that service. And we have in fact expanded our number of employees over the last 2 years, certainly the last year with our successful HR, which is fabulous for our look to how we serve the public, but it definitely has set us in a very challenging position for the coming year, as we will all be coming back together. Next year, we will be looking at a really large deficit. And I know Sean's got some documents for us to look at so that we can frame that up and really think about what our options are for the future. But it is exceptionally concerning to me that we are building a budget on the savings. It was concerning last year, it's concerning again this year, because I fear that next year it will be a very sharp drop that we're forced to make. I know that, I believe Doug's gonna call for us to meet monthly to essentially do a budget planning starting right after this, so that come February, when it is time to build budgets for departments, we will know what our approach is, what new revenues may be possible, and how far that can go. And if we will have to make corresponding cuts just to get ourselves to that space, because as we've talked about, this is a stopgap budget. So it's exceptionally concerning. There's not much seed corn left when we're done this year. And I know, I love that because it puts a little levity into all of this that we're talking about, as we call it seed corn. But we definitely are in a challenging spot. And this, I don't believe, based on the work that I've seen that Sean has done, that next year that this will be possible. There will not be, unless we get a huge unexpected bump of revenue from timber, I don't think there will be enough next year. So I look forward to working toward both new revenue sources, but also being mindful that the other side of that coin may be something that we have to approach that we have not wanted to, as we've all avoided again this year by just, continuing to borrow on the future. So I will be optimistic and hopeful that we can identify revenue sources, but definitely have a huge concern that we are here again.
Thank you, Commissioner Bell.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank Sean and Deborah for your excellent work. And it's a huge, huge job, and you guys do a remarkable job, and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for you, so thank you. And I'd also like to thank our committee members and just let you know what a pleasure it is to work with you. It's really, I've enjoyed this process and this budget committee so much. It's great to have fresh eyes and fresh voices. It's great to be talking with the committee about revenue generation and new ideas. It's great to be talking about strategic planning. It was fun in the first budget hearing to hear departments presenting to you, because you're all new, like, this is what we do, and this is what we're proud of, and this is who we are, and so it's really, you don't know because you don't have the perspective of former budget processes. You don't know how the energy has changed, but it really has, and it's very nice, and I thank you for that. And I really look forward to working with you on solutions. I think it's exciting to be talking about revenue. Also, as all my colleagues and you, everyone has said, there could be lean budget times ahead, but also new opportunities, because for a long time, the county has just worked with what we had. And so, as I think we said in the last budget hearing, our choices are to make cuts or generate revenue. So let's talk about generating revenue. I think that's very exciting. I think we're gathering information about that now, and we'll have more information about it soon, and more ideas. And so I agree, there may come a time when we're looking at what are our mandated services, and then we build out a budget from there. And it could be painful because we do a lot of things we're not mandated to do. But also, we can be talking about, here are the ways that we're generating revenue, and these are the things we're paying for with it. So I will remain optimistic, at least cautiously optimistic, that this group of people can affect change. And this time next year, I will hold hope that we're in better shape than we're afraid we're in today.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, I would also thank the three of them. It's always good to have fresh eyes and a fresh perspective, especially from California. And it's
At least one smart person.
well, and I was going to say, now, if you read my last memo, all three of you got a smart recognition here.
Too late, Doug.
And well, truly you are, and that's the reason, in my mind, you always have more than one person, although we have a very good treasurer, but we have people that look at it, and you have different backgrounds and you have different values, and collectively, that's how we get from here to there. For me, a budget is for any organization, is a statement of values. What do you value? And reason is that you have choices. You can do A or B or C, but maybe you can't do all three. So you have to make a choice of A or B or A or C or B or C or whatever it is you have to do, and that's basically how public policy is formed. And so we're at a point now, and I've been doing this a lot longer than anybody in the room. I think it's probably close to 20 years I sat over there. And it is time for new people to come along. But I will tell you, I don't think this was the most difficult year this time around. There've been some ugly years over the past where decisions had to be made and things didn't come together as quickly as we would like. But I will say, looking forward, I don't remember a period where there seemed to be more uncertainty or more dark clouds ahead of us than we are right now, simply because the landscape has changed, not only with the forest, but maybe with other things and the cost of things and the people side of it. And so as I said in a couple of the memos I sent out recently, there's lots of things we can look at, and revenue being one. And then the flip side of the ledger is expense. And I think realistically, it will end up being a combination, and I can almost guarantee, as we've done every year, the budget will be balanced. So then the question is, in future years, how much pain and what does the county stop doing that it's doing now, or what does it do differently? And all those questions that'll come across the landscape here over the next months. And as Commissioner Scott had mentioned, she and I have talked briefly about, since she's a liaison to the treasurer, on how can we best use you folks and all of us together. And as you know, the budget cycle does begin right after the first of the year. Typically in February, there's some information that goes out, and then the departments begin looking ahead. And it's a 4 to 5 month process to get it all done and get it where we are today. So that's not all that far off. It's 8 months, but the summer goes by fairly quickly, and some of these things are going to take more than one conversation. If it's an adjustment or a combining or a reduction of, or new revenue, for example, we've talked a lot about the TLT. That will require a vote of the people, and that takes some time, excuse me, to plan and get that on the agenda. So any event, we'll start talking about that yet today if we can, and probably not make any decisions, but maybe point ourselves in the right direction. So having said all that, I think we can all agree that we do have a balanced budget. The treasurer has done a good job again, as she always does, but I think at considerable peril in the long run. So I'll just leave it at that. So the next item is the approval of the budget. So before we do that formally, I'm going to ask again if there's anyone online or in the room, public, private, employee, who wants to speak to any subject that's before us today in the budget. Okay, well, I will invite them to speak up as well as we talk about some of the options for the future here in a few minutes. I'm sure they'll have some ideas as well. So now to approve the budget, that's typically done by motion, second, and then a vote of the committee. And we approve it then as presented to us today, if that's your pleasure. If you want to modify something, now would be the time. Otherwise, we'll consider that motion. And then, as was explained, it goes before the commission towards the end of June. And on what day did you? 26th. So the last meeting of June will be formally adopted. And the commission can change a few things if we have late breaking news. But if it gets to a point, and I believe the threshold is 10%, anything beyond that, we would need to reconvene this committee and consider what the changes are, plus or minus. It could be additional revenue even, it could be an expenditure adjustment or something else. Typically, that's not, doesn't happen very often, but I guess it can. So with that, will entertain a motion to adopt this entire budget as presented to all of us and as on the record and as the budget message was presented.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the budget submitted by the county treasurer on May 22nd, 2024.
All right.
I second.
And it's moved and seconded then that we approve the budget as presented this day and date. Are there any further discussions, comments? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Are there any abstentions? So I'm going to say the vote was 6-0. Okay, well, thank you very much. We're done. And we don't get to go home yet. We're going to stay right here till 1 minute to 5. I'm not going to be a taskmaster today. Maybe not, but so let's read into the record now the levies. And do you have those? You want me to?
They're page 5 of the
Page 5, okay.
The other way there.
The other way. This one here?
One more.
One more. Okay. Oh, wait a minute here, that's not the levy.
Page 2, I think, is this the one?
Yeah.
Sorry, you have more pages. Okay,
It's page 2 in my book.
sorry.
Page 2, all right. Okay, I'm going to read this into the record, and then we'll do the same thing. I'll ask for a motion and approval, and this becomes then the official record that goes to the county assessor. So the Tillamook County General Services permanent rate is $1.4986 per $1,000. And that means $1.49 plus 8 cents of per $1,000 of assessed value. The second one is a library local option tax of 65 cents per $1,000. Next one is a veterans service local option tax of 7 cents per $1,000. Then a library debt service levy of 0. And a road debt service levy of $367,200. And that's a dollar amount certain. These levies represent the requirements of the proposed budget. The Budget Committee must approve the levies as part of the budget approval. So having read that on the record, I'll ask for a motion to approve them as read.
So moved.
Moved and seconded then that the numbers read into the record will be the official amount sent to the assessor. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, on the record, the tax levies are set for the next fiscal year. So now I believe we might have a supplemental budget to consider. And I'll ask our Treasurer Blanchard, would you explain a supplemental budget for everyone, why that occurs from time to time?
A supplemental budget can occur if we have increased revenue or decreased revenue to increase or decrease the appropriations in certain funds. I figured since everybody was around today, I wouldn't have to call hopefully another meeting and catch some of these funds that generally usually get more revenue. And it's pass-through funds, say the county school or mental health. And I try not to get an audit comment and have overspent funds by my auditors. So in your packet, there is a supplemental budget, and it shows I can go line by line and let you know which funds I do know that are currently overspent or which ones I believe it should be in the front.
Page 3, I believe.
It starts with the Forest Timber Trust.
Yeah,
Increase-
Exhibit A.
Exhibit A.
It's back. It's after the tax levy. There you go.
Yeah, Exhibit A, excuse me. So this is showing an increase in the Forest Timber Trust. We did have a few more legal expenses this year than what we originally budgeted for. These are coming from timber dollars. The TLT tax, Rachel and I finally got on the same page of there should be zero balance in TLT, so I needed to add a beginning fund balance to transfer into the TLT facilities, which you'll see right below it. The workforce housing had a few more expenses than what was adopted last year, so I'm increasing the beginning fund balance and interest in their contracted services. Mental health, it's like rolling the dice with them each year, how much pass-through funding we will get, and I think I've gotten an audit comment, and I believe my predecessor did every year because you'd miss it by like $10. So I'm hoping this is enough to cover them for the rest of the year. Same with the county school fund. There's a little bit more in property taxes, previous and interest for the road debt service. And then the road improvement construction resource, we had a invoice that missed making last fiscal year's cutoff payment. And so it rolled over into this fiscal year. They do have the beginning fund balance to cover that. There were no appropriations for this fiscal year, so that is their beginning fund balance and then the payment for us.
Okay, so these adjustments will end up in this year's budget, the budget that we're just finishing. So that's why it's called a supplemental budget to FY 23-24.
Correct.
And then if she's captured everything, then the auditors will be happy and we move on. So, any questions on the supplemental material?
And with your approval, I will be taking it before the board on June 26th for their signature.
I move approval of the supplemental budget as presented.
Moved and seconded to approve the supplemental budget. Any further questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, good. We're moving right along. So now we have some non-agenda items and some time before us. So before we go through a list or open that up, we did get a very colorful handout here. I'm assuming this is Deborah's work, right? So Sean or Deborah, would you like to explain this and if it would be useful at this point in the agenda or later, or what would you like us to consider on this?
No, we can go through this now. We took the 24-25 general fund budget breakdown to, can you make that a little bigger? Yeah. Expand your screen. Oh, okay. So we took the general fund, broke it down into what the budgeted revenues are, where we get them from, put them in nice color coding and numbers for people that like numbers. And did a comparison next to some of our expenses. And it really shows where our expenses lie, is 69% is in personal services this year. Our total revenues are going to be $23,354,000. Our total expenses, $26,833. You can see where that almost $4 million comes into play of where what we're using of our beginning fund and our revenue stabilization. We also did a departmenting funding levels, use of unrestricted resources. First, you have the central service departments, which include the county commissioners, facilities, HR, IS, motor pool, treasurer, and the indirect and the piece that comes to the general fund, central services for TLT and CAFA. And it really shows out of what our net resource use is, we're using $3.2 million of general fund monies. Also breaks it down into government services, general use, and public safety, and what each of those, how much each of those use of our general fund. Any questions on that so far?
Any questions on page one? Before we go to page two, would you talk about special funds again, just for the benefit of anyone who's listening, that the categorical expenditures are, in other words, you get a certain amount of money and it's dedicated to that particular activity, and there are not provisions to spend it on something else. And so could you speak to that, just so everybody understands the difference again between a general fund and the special fund, and why we spend all the time and energy on the general fund as compared with the others where there's a lot more money?
Special revenue funds have to be in balance. They obtain through grants or federal estate grants, fees they can collect. What else is there? But they have to balance their expenses versus their revenue. They have to basically run like a business, like the parks does. They bring in their funds and it's spent on theirs only, and transfers really shouldn't be made between special revenue funds and other funds. There was a couple years ago that we were supplementing veterans before they increased their tax rate. The general fund was providing them with some additional funds. I do know the one fund that we cannot fund is road. Cannot receive any general fund money. And we can't really receive money unless it's for a reimbursement, such as the TLT expenses we claim, or the new this year is the 150-some thousand coming from the workforce housing to support short-term rental code enforcement, which I know Sarah's been working with the sheriff on that. So those are allowable because they're reimbursing us for services the general fund is providing.
Thank you. And the reason I want to read that put that on the record again is when you talk to people outside of this room who may not follow this 24/7, which is everybody, they often say, well, we pay all these property taxes, why can't you fix a pothole in front of my house? Well, part of the answer is because the law doesn't permit property taxes to be used on roads in Oregon. And there are lots of other restrictions. For example, I'm quite sure if money comes in for a particular service in the health department, that's where money goes. You can't take it and put on roads or elsewhere either. There are lots and lots of restrictions. And so people look and they say, well, you got $150 million and you can't do this or do that, and the reason is 100 million of that plus is restricted. And so just so you folks know, as you're out and about in the community, that's something to keep in mind when you explain where this $150 million goes. So go to page 2 if you would.
A couple comments on page
Please,
1 first?
please do,
Yeah.
yes, anytime.
So part of the exercise that's in front of us is going to be figuring out what we're gonna do in the next year, right? And so it felt to me like this would be a helpful breakdown as we start to think about different funding sources, different things that we can go after, looking at what we're exactly going after them for, if that makes sense. So a couple of things that I'd asked Sean to do. One was the breakdown of central services and to recognize that the transfer that we do get from our special revenue funds is reflected there. You see that 1.838 as the positive against the central services, right? Which leaves us with 3.2 million in central services that has to come from the unrestricted general fund. So I was trying to kind of dive in a little bit deeper in preparation for our thoughtful conversations, right? What are we going to be going after? What kinds of money might be able to pay for what kinds of things that are currently funded with our general fund that we're falling short on? So similarly, looking at government services and recognizing that many of those government service departments are funded significantly on fees and don't draw a ton from the general fund. Others do draw more from the general fund. So again, it's looking at not just, hey, it's the general fund, we got to get more general fund, but specifically, what are we funding? Because I think that's going to be important as we talk about revenue generation and we talk about, if we're going out to the public, what is the public likely to be willing to fund? If we're going to tourism type industries, what are they likely to be willing to fund? So as we start getting into that piece of how do we over the next 6 to 9 months create a revenue generation plan, which will probably have many different things that we're using, right? Which ones plug into which places most easily? So it just felt like that would be a useful breakdown for all of us to have in front of us and think about as we did that. So
I've got one question. The 69% on personnel, how does that track over, is that been pretty stable over the last 5 years, or has that gone up significantly?
It's gone up. With the market study, with the one-time adjustment we did during COVID when we were losing people left and right to try and retain employees. We've also settled, at least AFSCME, working with Teamsters. So no, it's gone up.
You remember what that might be, say, 5 or 6 years ago?
It was around the high 50s, 58% in 18, 19. It's gone up since then.
And we've also had the changes like the last couple of years, or actually the last 3 years, pandemic specifically, and coming out of the pandemic were the number of vacant positions that we had. So budget-wise, it showed at the higher percent, but we actually ended up spending less because of our vacancies. And now we're in a good place where we no longer have the number of vacancies we used to have. So now that 69% is an actual solid, 69% that we are likely to spend. So that's the other factor with personnel.
It certainly is a higher percentage, and as you can see now, I will tell you, having worked in schools at one time, and if you're following what's going on in a lot of our school districts around Oregon, schools spend somewhere around 85% typically on salaries and benefits, personnel costs, and so they have less money, but we, for other things, but percentage-wise. But the county has some other fairly heavy expenses. For example, this morning, we approved a series of contracts for asphalt. And asphalt is tied to petroleum, and it's not real cheap. And so if you want paved roads, you pay for it, and it's a pretty significant expense to the road department. And there's some other things as well that cost a lot of money that counties do and some cities do and others, but by and large, it's personnel is where the bulk of the money is. But then I think from my part, you have to remember the people who deliver these services are being paid. They're the people who do it. Without them, it probably wouldn't get done in some cases. So you want to go to page 2 and talk about that one?
So So that is the budget forecast and repeatability test, which is a 5-year total resource and expense forecast. Where it's circled in yellow, that's where the general fund drops before the 6.5 necessary for July to November operations at the end of 25-26. And we wanted to get a visual of that, hopefully pretty cleanly, so you could see where we're going.
And part of the reason for that, if you understand the cash flow, our fiscal year is July 1, but property taxes don't come in till about the middle of November. And they come in then about maybe 90%, and the remainder comes in 2 more segments. And we also collect on the first pass roughly 95% of the property taxes that are levied. Now, the rest come in over the next few years, typically except for those that go into foreclosure, and which isn't a large number. But so when you say the budget starts July 1, you don't get much money coming in until November. So that's why you have to have a beginning cash balance, like you do in your own personal checking accounts. You probably have some money, it gets you to the next payday or whenever, like most of us do. Same thing. So that's why this is a key amount of what is necessary to keep things going until you get an infusion of property tax money. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You did. So if you look at the next chart, the 5-year projected additional resource needs, green line shows the revenue budget that ODF is saying we're going to receive, and then it goes back down. But that dollar amount above is what we need over our current resources. So 25-26 we'll need 1.2, 26-27 over 2 million, 4 million, 4, so it keeps going up. And these assumptions do have the additional $1 million TLT. It does have a vacancy factor and assumes that the general fund will have at least 3 vacant positions at any given time. It dropped the one-time opioid transfer that's occurring next fiscal year. It reduced 350 budgeted in 24-25 to 175 per year for the workforce housing, short-term rental, and public safety. It added in the $2 million revenue stabilization balance transfer in 25-26. That would wipe out the revenue stabilization fund. Increase the building improvement to $500K per McKinsey proposal for years 1 and 2. And then it was reduced IS capital outlay for computer refresh in 24-25 to $100,000 per year, 25-26 forward for the next 5-year refresh. It included the one-time $1 million timber bubble bump revenue excess in 26-27. We can only go based on what ODF has told us and provides each year in February. For fiscal years 2026 through 2030, still have the 1 million for TLT through 2030. Increased, still have the vacancy factor, but it is increased 3% a year. As other things change. Still have the 175 workforce housing. There is no revenue stabilization left. Drop the building improvement to $250K per year for 2026-2030. IS capital outlay continued at $100K with a 2% increase for inflation over the years. And drop the timber revenue $900,000 or 20% to $3.6 million in 2028 to account for the Oregon Department of Forestry HCP. That's about what that represents.
So this to me is a very realistic picture of what we know going forward, and of course it becomes more problematic the further out you go, but I think there's a lot of very realistic numbers here. And let me remind you how our property tax system works, especially for our transfer from California. We have what you had down there was Proposition 13 in the old days, and here it's known as Proposition 5 and 50, and then there was a Proposition 47 that corrected some of the language. But what that did is that froze property tax levels at a level that was roughly in 1991, somewhere in that, I forget the exact year, but a long time ago, roughly 30 years ago, there was a level of dollars in for schools and then another level for general government. And the main thing is it provided that the property tax levels used the then numbers on the tax roll. And you were only able to increase 3% a year. And so what the county and a lot of other organizations have been doing is they'll budget 4% more because you get the 3 as a matter of statutory permission, but the extra 1 is growth. And so if you want to be reasonably conservative, you inflate by 4% what the property tax brings in. And if you happen to have a much larger development or big employers or something, it can change a little bit more. But there's some certainty for people who pay it, but it in no way, in my judgment, keeps up with what the cost of living and other things that are happening. And so much like California, what used to be the main driver, and the main driver for most cities and counties is property tax. We have no income tax in Oregon, and no for cities, and we do have an income tax, but it's state. But the counties don't derive money from that, nor do cities or other jurisdictions. So we're basically relying upon a property tax that has been frozen in time. And so that diminishes the options that you can do. So we're looking at the TLT and a bunch of other things we can talk about. And I'll make one more comment and ask others to join in as well. The TLT here of $1 million assumes a couple of things. It assumes the rate goes up to about 15%, and then it assumes that everybody agrees that's a good thing and votes it in, including the lodging enterprises as well as the citizens. And that's not a sure thing at all. And if it did not go in, then Sean would back out $1 million of what you have in there now. So you need to be aware of that as you look at that. This makes an assumption that will come about probably in the next fiscal year, not the one we just approved, but the one after, if it's on the May ballot. And that's not wishful thinking, but there's considerable risk in my judgment. And others, I'm doing all the talking here. Do you want to weigh in on that at all?
So by removing the $1 million, it makes it, 5 million by 2029, 2030.
Just like that, you can take $1 million out, just like that.
It's a great dashboard. That way you can keep playing, which will be helpful as we do this revenue sort of generation game that we're going to be playing, if you will, over the next, 6 months, where we're trying, what if this, what if that, what if the other? We can keep plugging things in and seeing how it impacts.
With the TLT, this is a question for edifying, explaining to me, there are people that are renting, they pay the tax, it's not the person who owns.
No, it's typically, a short-term rental would be 29 days or less.
Right.
If you're 30 and up, then typically you become a tenant, and that falls under Oregon's landlord-tenant law. 29 days or less, whether it's a vacation rental or a lodging property or whatever, you pay that amount. And it depends if you're in the city or the county, and the cities have their own, and they have some different requirements than the counties. So if I remember right, the money we get from the cities is only about 7% of the total. The remainder then is the county's imposed tax that's been in effect now since 2014, 10 years, and it's been a flat 10%.
So the person who owns the short-term,
They
have to charge the tax.
They charge it, so if you went into a motel or even an overnight accommodation and you paid $100, they would collect from you about $111.50. The $1.50 of that would go to the state that's been doing that for a long time. The remainder would go to the county if you were in an unincorporated area, the $10. Now, the lodging operators keep 5% of that as their compensation for doing the paperwork and collecting the tax. So 95% of the 10% is remitted to the county if you're in an unincorporated area. If you're in a city, then they keep their share of that, and there's a 1% differential. So like in Rockaway, for example, if I think theirs is 9%, you would pay the same $111.50, but Rockaway would keep $90 of that. $10 would come to the county, and the rest would go to the state, minus the fee for collecting it. So it's not terribly complex, but it's a little convoluted.
So it sounds like there's a difference between a hotel, motel, and a short-term.
No, I don't think there's any distinction at all.
No, hotels, motels, campsites.
Yeah, campsites for sure.
Airbnbs, Vacasa, et cetera, it's all the same.
I think the only thing that's different is bed and breakfast, which is a tourist accommodation that has its own thing, I think. But essentially, yeah.
Yes, Rachel.
I would also add to this picture, if I heard Sean's assumptions correctly, I think this picture is even more dire because of 500,000 for the building improvement and then a $250,000 contribution to the building improvement fund does nothing by the way of really making a dent in our deferred maintenance. I think those amounts would basically just be what we've been doing largely to date, which is just maintaining the status quo. So I think, and I know what our budget constraints are, but if we're going to maintain our facilities, those amounts are significantly low, so.
So Rachel, I would ask if you and Sean could work together to get numbers that you think are realistic to put in there for us to have as we're doing this work. I think that's a very good call out.
So do you have any more on this thing, or have we gone to the last page, basically? Okay,
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
so let's do this. I sent out a list, couple of them here of some ideas, some of which are probably make some sense and others are maybe way out in left field, I don't know, but, we can go down that list, or we can just throw out ideas at random and take some good notes. Or what would be your pleasure? Maybe we can start a conversation on each of these items and or we can talk about the ones that have the most impact first, and I do have something to offer on that, but let me ask all of you, how would you like to continue the conversation here, looking into the future? What does the county need to think about, talk about, and manipulate, or otherwise come to grips with?
Well, I don't know, it's, as I've said before, it's and clearly with your list and other discussions we have, it's not one thing that's gonna fix this, it's gonna be a whole bunch of things, and I'm hopeful, and I wanna be glass half full guy, that it can be done with increasing revenue, but I'm not 100% sure that's gonna be the case. But I guess I would say, as far as I'm concerned, nothing's off the table. Some things are gonna be easier to digest than other things, but as far as I'm concerned, everything should be at least looked at. And then the commissioners can decide how they wanna proceed and when they wanna do it. But if you wanna start with your list, that's as good as any, as far as I'm concerned.
So what is your pleasure? I have this long list, but how would you like to start talking about items? Some of them are nominal, others pretty substantial.
Commissioner-elect Fournier keeps raising his hand there. in the
Oh, I'm
back.
sorry, yeah.
Let me able to speak for a minute?
Why don't you come on up to the table?
Just want, before you go into your list, I think you can address some of these things. I agree that I think it's gonna be more dire than this, but I feel like the discussion, and I think you were leading towards that. This to me is a challenge. This to me is, we have a lot of work to do. We need more houses to build our tax base. It's not gonna be one thing, it's gonna be a bunch of things. This is, we're like so somber and dire, and it's a serious thing, but we have to figure out solutions to it, and we have to start now. Like these things, whether it's bringing in more revenue by maybe moving parks back in, like, we have to think differently. We can't use special funds, but we can move things back in the general fund and make money. We have to build bigger projects, build a convention center, build a hotel. Like, there's a lot of ways that we can use other money, tourism money, to help us build things that we can then make revenue off and get tax money from. And I just feel like, I'm not sure, I mean, I think I love this new budget committee because they are positive. They're asking really important questions, really thoughtful questions. And I feel like we know it's bad. So I'm glad we're getting to the point where we're gonna say, what are we gonna do to make it better? Because if we just do nothing, this is what's gonna happen, but only worse than this, because the way prices have gone up, it's gonna be probably worse than this. So I'm not like an optimist saying, oh, we're gonna be fine. I think it's gonna be bad, but I think we have to start being positive and generating really positive ideas. we're all sitting in this room, the solution part is what we really should be focusing on. And TLT is gonna be a part of it. I don't think it's gonna be a problem passing, but you're right, it might not, who knows? We have all these other restrictions, but we've gotta start changing our culture of we're doomed to we're doomed if we don't do something. That's all. I'm back to going crazy because I feel like the energy matters, words matter. If we say we're gonna be in a bad situation in 10 years, then we are certainly gonna be in a bad situation in 10 years. We can know this to be true. Two things can happen at the same time. We can know this to be true, but we can be actively, aggressively changing this. This is not our future, guaranteed. So I think that having people that are looking into revenue, and I think everything's on the table. I just wanted to say that. I just feel like it's hard to be a member of the public and now a commissioner-elect, and it's just one bad thing after another when we know it's bad. But let's put our heads together. We have a lot of smart people in this room, and let's figure out how do we change our trajectory so that's not our future. That's all. Thank you for the
Well,
opportunity.
thank you for that, and I personally, I don't disagree at all, and what I was trying to do is set the table here so that we all have a fairly clear understanding of where this is headed, and I agree, nobody can predict the future, and, you know, things could change drastically. In a minute here, I'm gonna give you what I think is the first and best solution to all of this, but it's only one part of everything, and I'll say it right now. I think we need to look hard and long at a sheriff's operating levy. That's done elsewhere. And I'll just take a moment to describe it. And as you can see, I spent quite a bit of time going back through this and looking at it. And it's going to be very hard to do 50,000 here and 200,000 there and maybe $500,000 over here, but that's all part of the big picture. But if we went to law enforcement and said they're at 9 million now or whatever, they're the lion's share of the general fund budget. And if we took out, let's say we left the jail, because that's a statutory requirement to operate a jail, and some of the management and other support things. But we take out most of the patrol division, maybe there's 4.5, 5 million there. I'm just picking a number now, don't have it exact. And we put that on a serial levy like we've done the library. And we say, okay, this is what the number is, and it could be reflective of that number or a little more, and then ask the voters to approve it. And give them, and the reason for that is that would solve a lot of the problems in one fell swoop. Not all of them, but a good share of it. And it would be simpler and maybe easier for people to understand and less painful. Now, the downside, and I know the sheriff would say this if he were here, and I didn't see him online, but.
Yeah, he's there.
Oh, is he? And he can certainly speak to yeah, there he is. I think the sheriff has said in public meetings, he does not favor that, and for the simple reason that you get an officer trained, takes 18 months, maybe almost 2 years, and then 3 years later, his job may or may not be in jeopardy if it fails, and what happens, and law enforcement begins going like this. But I just offer that as a partial fix, and the biggest chunk right off the bat. It's something to think about, and we're not reinventing the wheel. This is done at a number of locations, counties elsewhere, not just in Oregon, but across the country, because law enforcement is a large part of most organizations' general funds. And people may or may not like it, and certainly if the sheriff came out and said, as an elected official, this is a rotten idea, and here's the downside, then it probably wouldn't pass. But as we've said, let's put everything on the table. So I would offer that on the table as a way forward that would solve a significant part of the issue we're facing.
Deb, can I take on to that for a second?
Certainly can.
Two things about it. One, an operating levy grows like property taxes grow, so at least you have a growth opportunity. So I think whatever the levy conversation ends up being, I think levy is likely going to need to be a part of it because it's growth factor as opposed to fees or one-time things that are harder to deal with that. The other thing that I heard about that I thought was really interesting was, I think it's in the state of Washington, they have something called the Heritage Levy Bill. And after a levy passes like 3 times, it becomes a permanent rate instead of having to go out every 5 years. So I think in addition to all things being on the table, right? So in addition to looking at a levy locally, looking at working at the state level with our legislators to try to make it so that we can, if our community stays committed to these pieces, that we could make it permanent, so that we wouldn't have this up and down cycle that you're talking about, Doug, and we wouldn't have to constantly be going back out for it. So that was something I think we want to look into it during this process, is what does Washington have? How does it work? And could we get a bill like that for ours that just says, once your community shows their commitment, because I think about the library, we're on like our 3rd renewal, then you don't have to keep doing it. So just one more thing to put on the list of research.
I'm not a fan of the levy idea for a multitude of reasons,
Yes.
but I don't think it's off the table. I think what happens is it's the easiest solution, because we always want that more money and then we do we stop thinking of all the other options?
No.
Because that's the thing, what happens when you do this is we're like, well, now we're flush again, and we're fat and happy, and we don't have to worry about it, and I think that's what got us here where we are now. Deschutes County has a levy, it works for them, they have a much larger population than we do. We're about to be asking our locals for a lot of money to upgrade our radio system. I think, I don't know if the appetite is there for this, and I still think our energy, just my opinion, our energy should be really being creative, other creative solutions. That's an obvious solution. That's what that's the low hanging fruit we've been grabbing at the whole time. We need to start doing our jobs and really figuring out other things. That's all.
And I agree. I don't think it should be off the table. The problem I have with an operating levy and a bond request for the communication equipment and the TLT things, you can only go to the voters so many times before they start going, what the hell? I'm not gonna keep voting for things. So I think in addition to putting everything on the table, a real strong look needs to be made at how do you do this and what's the timing of it? Because, on one hand, we're saying, which is true, that something has to be done quickly, but if it's all on the taxpayers saying yes or no, that's not gonna work either, because you can't go to the well so many times so quickly before they just start saying no.
And
Without
they
you,
just did with the fire.
exactly, yeah.
Okay, MJ.
Well, I understand the levy idea, and certainly I could support it, because I support the sheriffs, and I would want somebody to come, because I live in the county. However, in talking to other people, they don't want any sort of, what I wanna say, law enforcement interventions. So just like this fire, levy, I voted for it thinking it was important. If you worked in a burn unit, you would think fire is important. However, in the people I talk to in my neighborhood, people don't. And so not only does it increase property tax and it makes it very difficult for people on fixed incomes, which I happen to be one of them, but I don't think a law enforcement levy per se, especially on the heels of the 110 or whatever it was, people are wanting less law enforcement intervention, you know what I mean? So I really don't think that's the answer. One of the things I'd like to see, and if we're gonna have some budget workshops, is to get a presentation from community development on what property does the county have that we could make the, what do you say, tiny house villages, because they seem to be somewhat successful. Do we have any provisions for that? And looking at it, we keep hearing things that I think is just rumor about the costs and the hurdles in getting plans for housing approved. I'd like to get some, straight from the horse's mouth, what is valid and what isn't? What can we do to get more housing? We need more taxpayers. And right now, people that are my nephew's age in their 30s and 40s, they can't buy a house even in Oregon. It's not possible anymore. It's just like California. You can't get into a house if you're a young person. I had the people from Pacific Power, they contracted to cut all these bushes. Must have been 8 kids there. I would say they were early 20s. Their conversation was about they were making $65,000 to $70,000 a year, and they were wanting to buy houses, all these kids, and I thought that was very commendable. But they're already realizing the cost of escrow and the cost of even getting into a house, and I'm thinking, these guys are ambitious, they're taking high-risk jobs to get money. They're not gonna be able to get into the housing market in Oregon. So adding to the property tax, to me, isn't the answer. One of the reasons I had to move is because of property taxes. In California, it doesn't stay at that 3%. When you sell and you buy new, it goes up to the new selling price. And so it's a runaway train. It's impossible. That's why I moved, okay? Because I needed to move and I couldn't afford to stay in California because of the tax structure. I don't want that to happen here. I would like to look at tiny house options. We call it workforce, but some of even the workforce housing we can't afford. You know what I mean? And if it's a rental, that doesn't help the property tax base, you know? But I just have a strong hesitancy toward a law enforcement levy because I don't think it's gonna fly. I think we need to find another way to fund it. Even if it's surcharge at the parks, apparently I figured out what that is, and if you're in a state that allows you to recoup the cost of doing business, you're allowed to do that, which we are. In Oregon, you can do that. So for example, parks could reduce their cost of bank fees by saying, if you're gonna pay with a credit card, it's gonna cost you X amount of money. You pay with a debit card, doesn't cost you anything. We could also do something similar that the sheriff commented about Sun River, where you can have a donation to the sheriff's. I know it's small, but with the parks, they're actually our poster child, if you will, of business success models. So if they were charging a donation to the sheriff's department, that would help offset something in this county. You know what I mean? But I'd like to have some more information about how do we process new housing. Especially for the people who live here who want to build or redo some of the houses that have melted down or broken down.
Yes, Rachel.
If I could make a staff recommendation on perhaps how to proceed,
Sure.
Commissioner Olson, I think this is a really good time. There's a lot of energy around this. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I think it would be great to see you as a sitting commissioner who's leaving at the end of the year, who's not having to worry about running for an election. You're a longtime sitting budget committee member and chair, to convene the budget committee in monthly meetings that we schedule in the next couple of weeks out through the end of the year and perhaps beyond your tenure here, where the budget committee is looking at all these revenue ideas without implementing any of them, and with all of the potential expense cuts that we could be exploring, because I think there are ways that we can trim across the board that isn't coming before the budget committee next year saying 20 positions gotta go. And if that is identified as a need, it's something that's rolled out over time, but it's strategic because there's a lot of good revenue ideas on the table. But in order to, I think, get buy-in from either voters or the board or staff or whoever needs to buy in on these ideas, we need to be able to say why.
Right.
So if we have a revenue package strategy that we implement over time that's thoughtful, and same thing with a potential expense reduction, and that's one big package that we can describe, then we have a lot better chance of getting out of the woods with these issues. So I would love to see you as the chair of the budget committee schedule those out, and I
Well,
can
and
support you on that.
that's
and others.
kind of what I had in mind, not exactly that format, but that certainly would work. The only reason I threw that out today was to get a little conversation going, and I didn't know how all this would come together, but that's exactly what we need, is maybe structured brainstorming.
Yeah, I'm willing to like talk about anything, but I'm pretty deliberative about how I think things through, and so I'm not even remotely prepared to say these are A, B, C, D things that need to be done today. So if you really want our input, and I appreciate that it sounds like you do, I'm more leaning towards Rachel's approach of of sort of spreading it out and being more deliberative and thoughtful about what each of these different things that we're putting on the table are, weigh the pros and cons of them. I'm not hearing a lot of enthusiasm for a sheriff's operating levy, but like I say, I think even Commissioner-elect Fournier said it still should be on the table. I think everything should be on the table until it's not. But I would appreciate a more thoughtful, longer-term approach to things. At the same time, as I've said many times now, time's a wasted, and if we take an entire year to make any kind of a decision, that's not good either, so.
Well, thank you. I agree with that, and I think everybody, I sent out a memo with 21 ideas on how to do this, and this is, so we just started a free form, but I certainly could do that. I could go back and set up a meeting that seemed to work for all of us and have it maybe recurring for half a day every month until we get through the fall and into the winter, end of the year, or whenever, and then there'd be some direction. And let's say there ends up with 30 things, adds and cuts. And then maybe we could prioritize them, or we could put a dollar value to them approximately, that if you did this, it's X million, or you did this, it's only 50,000, or whatever, and then rank them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or something that would work. How difficult is it to implement? Does it require voter approval? Can we do it internally? What are the consequences if we did this? What do we do without? All those kinds of things. So yes, I would be happy to do that. And if we all think that's a good way forward, sit and talk about it and say, and maybe even make a goal and have a couple of measuring points that by, let's say by October 1, we want to have eliminated, a certain amount, or be able to set those things aside that are either impractical or take too long or don't generate enough savings or income, and then some others that need more work, something like that, and put us all in the room and talk about it. But, so I certainly could do that.
I think it's an unusual approach. I mean, any budget committees I've been associated with sort of like usually ends today.
And we might have promised you that you only had to be at like 3 meetings, but.
But and I'm sure it's all legal and everything, but I mean, I'm fine with it. It's just unusual, and I think I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's a good way, to get input going forward, and I don't have a problem with that. And I like the measurable part and actually making progress on it. So I can't speak for the rest of the committee, but I'd be on board with that.
Commissioner, if there's a quorum, it has to be noticed in the paper each time too, not just online.
Mm-hmm. Well, we could do that. That's not an issue. We just say we're gonna have a public meeting at, from 1:30 to 4:30 on such and such a day, and just have it running through. And if we wanted to call a special meeting, and we could think about too, like, for example, I put the law enforcement levy out only because it's a big dollar amount. But I certainly wouldn't presume to go more than that. And if we did take that up in earnest, the person sitting in the front would be the sheriff and maybe some of his key staff. And they could say, all right, here's what we think might work or might not work, and here's the political considerations, here's the law enforcement considerations, and you'd hear from the people that had to enforce it. So that list of 21 things, the last thing on that list was ask the public what they want, and maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe that's too unstructured, and people will throw stuff at you. But every time I've asked the public in some meeting, you'd be surprised what you get back. There's a lot of smart people out there, including the 3 smart ones right here. You guys. Yes.
I have a question about your 4-day work week. I wasn't sure what you meant by that. Does that mean you're reducing? Like if I'm employed here 40 hours a week, does that mean I'm working?
32.
Okay, and so that reflects benefits and everything else? Is that
No,
what
the
you're?
benefits probably would stay on, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're over the 19-hour, the half-time threshold. So it wouldn't affect the benefits, but it would affect your direct salary. So if you're making $30 an hour, you're gonna lose that much money. And that, that's been done elsewhere too, so.
And does that impact the retirement as well?
Sure. Yeah.
No, not,
Yeah,
well, it might.
It would, because it's gonna be based on your salary.
Let me ask Jody, would if you went to a 32-hour week, how might that affect either the current one or PERS?
So your PERS would be based upon your hours worked or your salary. Our current defined benefit is based upon your monthly salary every July 1 of 2020, whatever. So it's going to depend on when that cycle is, but it over time could impact what is also paid in the pension on your behalf. Sean, did I state that correctly? Thank you.
So that's the answer, but, if you're looking at cash out the door, then you just saw the graph currently is 69% on personnel costs. So if that's reduced by some percentage, and including benefits and all, would probably stay constant, but the actual paychecks would be 20% smaller. And nobody's gonna like that, but the reality is, if you don't have enough money to do that.
Well, that's what I was asking. I wasn't sure it was 32 or you're just gonna have four
Well,
tens and then you're gonna save on utility
I can tell you that some Clackamas County at one time, a few years ago, went to a 4-day week. And I think they had some critical things, maybe law enforcement, I don't know, Paul might remember, but they were on a 32-hour week for a period of time until things changed and they got a little more cash flow into the organization. I put that on there simply because the two sides of the equation. You know, if you can't get enough money through whatever means, then you have to go the other side, and maybe you do both as a practical matter. Now, I know Ken has run a business, and you watch the expenses as much as you do the revenue. I mean, that's
I just
business
wasn't
101.
sure if you meant 10-hour days, cause that actually is.
No, then
that
if you
can
go to
be-
410s, that's your 40-hour week, and
Yeah, but you're saving on utility costs.
yes,
of
there
heating
are
a building
some
and-
savings.
And all that, and people driving around and.
And
it
there's
does-
productivity. For example, I can tell you the PUD organization went to 410s a few years ago, and all the evidence says it's a much more productive people, particularly out in the field, because they don't have to mobilize and demobilize and all that. They can get out there and finish the job.
I just wasn't
And
sure.
but that doesn't save you much money. You're more productive, then you may get more jobs done in the same amount of time. In terms of salaries and wages, it doesn't save a dime. You need to say to people, you're gonna have to clock out at a certain time, and that's how you balance the budget. Now, that's as distasteful as for my part, that's as distasteful as it comes, to tell somebody you're gonna have to cut you back.
Yeah, well, it happens.
Yeah.
But sometimes it happens. Yes, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
That's okay. So this is a great conversation, and it's making me nervous in the sense that this is a public meeting, so I just want to say publicly that all we're doing is spitballing ideas. We're brainstorming right now. We're not actually talking about cutting anybody's hours. And if we were, we understand that that would be a whole thing that would have to be negotiated with the union. So this isn't a plan. This isn't where we're headed. All we're doing right now is brainstorming ideas.
Right. What I would suggest too, and I think Doug mentioned this when he brought up the sheriff's operating levy, is that in these future meetings, if we discuss things that are department-centric, that those departments are invited to participate in those meetings.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, it feels like it would be almost if everyone were to go out of this meeting thinking about what would I suggest? And whether we pre-submit those things or whether at the first meeting we just get our big white paper and write them all out, however it is. But to get our list of ideas and then as a group to say, okay, which of the ones, let's rank these in terms of which are the ones that we would be willing to look at, are there ones that we absolutely are not willing to look at, and pare that list down and then prioritize them. And then we're gonna be having presentations and pro formas and all kinds of stuff that we're gonna have to do for each and every one of these different options to figure out, is it viable, how much would it bring in, et cetera. So, I mean, I think there's a cadence to that sort of set of meetings that starts with the big brain dump, not that something can't be added later if we find something we hadn't realized before. But then to do some prioritization and then get a plan for which ones will we look at here, which ones will we look at there, and kind of lay out the cadence by which we meet the metrics to the point.
And ultimately, if Plan A doesn't work, what's the fallback position? Because if, you know, I mean, we can see here that if the revenue doesn't come in, expenses gotta, I mean, it's one or the other, or
Correct.
both, or
And
some
maybe there's-
combination.
yeah.
But there's gotta be
Yep.
some kind of fallback position.
Sure, and I think what this gives us is the magnitude, right? I mean, that's what this particular document gives us, is the magnitude by year. So as we are working through it in the course of this year, we will have our eye on all 5 years, looking at what would, if we did it in year one, what would continue and how would that impact? But also just keeping in mind that whatever solutions we decide we're going after have to meet that magnitude and that timeline. I mean, that's kind of our North Star, right, of where we're going.
So and maybe we can wind it up a little early today and follow this format that seems to be evolving here. I think that does make some sense, but let me talk about just a couple I put on this list of 21 items where, what would you think of if we said, at some point, Budget Committee said we have to get X percent, whatever it turns out to be. We had to knock 3% out of our expenditures or 7%, whatever, and then pass that on to the department directors and let them do it, knowing that they know their department's best. Do you favor that approach or having it top-down versus across the middle?
No top down.
Yeah, right.
I think, as I said before, I think if something's being asked of the departments, they should be brought into the process.
Agreed.
And the same thing with the employees, if we ask them to look at the entire benefit package, I'd like to see the employees get together with the union reps and do some brainstorming. I guess I feel like there needs to be a reserve for the general fund that we put a benchmark that we don't want to go below that, okay? Maybe it's because I come with budgets that always have a reserve, and I want to believe Sean could help us with that. I know some of the different departments have their own reserve, but it seems to me the general fund needs to have a reserve, and maybe there's more than one reserve, one for maintenance in the building. We can't wait till the building falls down, and we don't want to wait. I don't want to wait until we have health issues because we have a sick building syndrome, okay, which you can have in an older building. So I guess I'd like to start with some of the basic budget principles as well, reserves, you know, and I don't know if the word contingency is the same thing, but I'm nervous with not having some sort of a bottom line reserve that includes deductibles for your insurance and
New vehicles.
basic, well, not so much new vehicles, but just some of the basics for to be able to make payroll for 6 months, you know, things like that. I call them, we had budgeting premises is what we called them, but I'd like to see that. And then I'd also like to get more information on, like I said, the community development and how we approve buildings and some information on the county assets. You're saying sell some. Is there anything that could be sold? Or is that property that we may need to do something with down the road?
Well, no, I just put that on the paper as an idea, but that's.
There's lots of property to sell.
There is?
We have a lot of forest lands that are just sitting there.
Oh, so we could sell the trees?
You can.
Okay.
That may be a
That may
one-time
also
and.
tie into all the discussions at the state level, about what's happening to the county forest trust lands, but we have a lot of land holdings that we're just holding on to.
I didn't know that. And the other thing that it comes to mind is some sort of a letter writing campaign or even the next step up with the state in order to, I guess, legislate. I guess sounds like it needs to happen in order to recoup our justice court fees. I keep going back to that, and
$5 million.
what was the nihilist?
Yeah.
What's his name? Existential nihilist. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't just kidding.
No.
But I would be the first to write 16 letters or show up in Salem, but to put together some sort of a mechanism or a movement to speak up, because that to me, to be required to offer a service that is draining money and it's actually harming society because there's no incentive to do anything. You know what I mean? It really bothers me. So I'd like to see that as part of our strategy as well. And I'm not a political kind of person, but I'd be happy to get on the bandwagon on something like that, because I understand that you guys do try to get some legislation done, and we've had the senators here. I don't mind writing an email or a letter or whatever, but that to me when the amount that their accounts receivable equals the amount that we're short is too suspicious to me.
Ken, you had your hand up.
Yes, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't ask all department leaders to start thinking about, if not submit a proposal to decrease costs by whatever percentage for next budget. Get everybody thinking about that now. And then, I mean, this isn't gonna make me the most popular person on a different board that I sit on, but I also wonder if we shouldn't get together with other counties and start a coalition to approach the governor's office about changing the TLT split to be more equitable in line with our needs, quite honestly.
Well, for my part, I don't disagree with any of that. I will tell you, if history is any guide, the TLT is an uphill, and I don't mean 10% grade, I mean it's 80% grade. And you know that as well, as you come up against some very influential and powerful forces. But maybe you do it in small bites. Instead of the 70-30, maybe it becomes 60-40. And that would free up some things as well. So you're quite right. I would say nothing is off the table. Back to the $5 million. We had a CAC meeting in Pacific City, our Citizens Advisory Group, and I was talking about a few things, and I brought that up. And basically what I said, and the consensus in the room was, the same people who put in Measure 100, free drugs for everybody, no consequences, are the ones who put that in. The problem is 57 miles that way. And you get exactly what you elect. And that's been our issue here now, that the elections have consequences. And I know and these people know a lot of legislators, and there's some wonderful, dedicated people, but collectively, sometimes they do some really goofy things. And in the state of Oregon, it's almost impossible to collect, not just here, across the state, traffic fines. There are no consequences, or very few, as I understand it, across Oregon. You know, so if you're driving down 84, going to the Dalles or somewhere, and you're going 100 miles an hour, probably get a ticket, but whether you pay it or not, or lose your license, don't know. Got a cop sitting right here. What do you think, Paul?
I think we should see if we can create our own ordinances for parking and get more money from them. And other things as well. But it's frustrating.
Yes.
That there is no bite. And we can't even pull cars over like we used to for things that are violations of the law, so.
Yeah.
I missed Ryan's colorful presentation, but I need to go back.
Should go back and look at it, yeah.
You can listen to the podcast.
I'm a fan.
Yeah.
It's also 5 million that's been accumulated over
For
a
20
period
years
of
or something.
Yeah, it's
Right.
not a single year.
It's not a single year, so if we could collect any of it, it would be helpful, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's mandated cost.
Mhm.
You know, and maybe if we can't get the legislation to change, that maybe it just goes to all electronic. And it's sort of like getting an alcohol blood test if they think you're under the influence. When you get your driver's license, you have to agree that you're gonna get a message, text message or phone message, and cut the cost of trying to collect. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Something,
Yeah.
to me,
Well-
it's a health and safety issue.
Yeah, and looking at other counties that you all did in the comparator, some of them don't have a justice court, or they have a contracted justice court. So that's the other thing, is just in some of these, somebody's look at job descriptions, I think it was UMJ, and see, are there things that can be combined, or are there things that we're doing that maybe there's a different way to do it? So I think as we go through all of these ideas, we'll also want to be looking at and probably pooling them. These are legislative fixes. Which ones of these are we thinking we want to take on that have the greatest, perhaps, potential success rapidly? So there's a whole bunch we'll have to sift out.
The other thing I wanted to say, when you mentioned selling the land owned by the counties, I don't want those to be the first things, because those are non-recurring. You can only sell your property once, right? And some other things, I mean, Commissioner-elect Fournier went and got a grant for I don't know, was that successful yet or not? We don't know yet. But anyway, but there might be grants for for one-time things, but those, you know, those aren't recurring type things. So I'd like to focus on things that are recurring and that we can be generating money perpetually and not cannibalize ourselves. We kind of did that already with spending
Yeah.
our reserves. It's like selling our property would be another way of cannibalizing ourselves. You know, if there's some way we can use that property for something that's productive and generates revenue, that's one thing. But I just want to make sure we focus on things that are going to be generating revenue perpetually.
I appreciate that comment because I would remind you that we did sell a bunch of timber property to pay for an annex to solve the circuit court solution, and that it's gone. We never did anything with it.
Right, agreed.
Yeah, I think we all agree, but I think we all agree until we hit that point where the revenue isn't there and we have to make the tough decisions about cuts, and then we decide that we're gonna carry ourselves forward. So I think this is a great conversation that we're having today. We're gonna do our darndest to make sure there's revenue next year of, you know, this whatever it is, the 1.2 million, and that the next year there's 2 million, but recognizing that this conversation is gonna continue to be important if for some reason we are not successful, despite all of our best efforts. Big.
So we can sit here and talk about some more, but may I suggest then that what Rachel said is a good idea, and others now I will put together a schedule and have, have Deb call around and make sure we find a time, and hopefully we'll all be here over the summer and fall, and if we can find maybe a half a day now and then, and if we had any money, we'd bring in lunch, but we'll probably have to pass on that too.
Brown bag. So
Brown bag it or something, but, no, if we could meet, say, from 1:30 to 4:30 or something, maybe a few times, every month. And I'll prepare an agenda then that offers up some options, and we can discard them at the first meeting, some of them, or want to know more. And then as we go along, like, for example, if we go to Public Works, I'll bring in Chris Lady, who's the director, and maybe, and he could bring in a little more of his staff or something, and we could spend a good share of that afternoon saying, how could this be made more efficient, or what other sources of revenue, et cetera, and I would have an eye towards sustaining revenue, not the one time, because the county's gonna be here long after we're all gone, and if we burn up everything we have now, then somebody else has the same problem. And so if we could find something, and the TLT is definitely a part of it, but that's not a given, and there are probably a number of other things, but, and some of the things can be done relatively quickly, so maybe we'll prioritize them as to time and effort, and, something that is really significant is gonna take 2 or 3 or 4 years, and then other things may require legislative help in Salem. And some things may be a great idea, but almost impossible to get done. So maybe we can sort that out and categorize them ABC or something like that and figure out a way forward. Now, one of the suggestions, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about that, what if at some point we ask for just general public input? Is that too broad, or should we narrow it down? Or do you just, you might get all kinds of crazy ideas, but, there might be a gem in there too.
I'm all for the public forums myself. I've attended some and I thought they were fantastic, the town hall thing. As long
Something
as
like
it's-
that, or,
As long as the person facilitating sets the ground rules and the boundaries, you know what I mean, how people present, like they did it with the senators. I mean, everybody's polite. I think it would be great. I'd be willing to attend.
well, maybe it wouldn't even be a public forum, maybe we'd take written suggestions and do it that way, or both, I don't know. I'm saying, as far as I'm concerned, we're facing a multi-million-dollar dilemma, and there's nothing that we shouldn't talk about. That's just my part.
I would agree with that. I think we'd be surprised at some of the ideas that would come out of it, and we need all the help we can get, quite honestly.
Rachel had her hand up.
Yeah, I agree. I think a couple things.
Well, go ahead, Rachel, and then we'll do Jody.
I think, so these are all gonna be public meetings, and I would have a public comment period on all of them, because I think there are gonna be a lot of great ideas that come out. I mean, think of all the ideas that came out of the Commissioner Appointment Forum, and there's just more and more that is surfacing. Additionally, it's gonna be part of the education, because some of these things will be implemented, or they need to be implemented. And so, having people understand along the way and learning will help when it comes time to get approval, and their buy-in. So, and it will maybe shape some of the policy that comes out of it as well. So I would have public comment on every monthly agenda. I would have, maybe we have a website or we use our public comment email address to just get solicitation or continue soliciting comments, as well as maybe just targeted town halls throughout. So, I mean, this is our time, as well as maybe we want to do polling as we get maybe further down the road and we're starting to see our revenue package take shape, as well as reductions. What are we doing the community doesn't want us to do? That has to be the other side of it.
Yeah.
Because we can't just ask for more revenue, because the first thing people are gonna ask is, what are you trying to reduce? And how are we trying to look at both sides? So I am as much public input as we can get.
I would agree. Jody, you had something?
I just wanted to be thoughtful during these discussions that we have a growing workforce that does a great deal of work for all of us, and that asking us to reconcile the budget deficit on employees, cutting back. I want to be very thoughtful of our approach. We value our employees. We've done a great deal of work to get us to a market strategy that we can explain. We're seeing jobs fill. I want to say sorry, but not sorry, because we have a very tired workforce. They have carried us through COVID, and they have worked through minimal staffing. And so I just want to be that voice. If they can't attend those meetings, I would encourage us to, I meet with the unions on a regular basis to talk about what their thoughts are and what their perspectives are. I mean, obviously more revenue is very, very important, but just being thoughtful that cuts are the last choices, and how can we balance the needs for revenue? And maybe there's programs that don't make sense for us to do as a county, something of that sort, rather than, across the board cuts that employees would have to absorb. So since they're not here, I just want to be able to say that. And then any changes that we do make, obviously, if it's impacting working conditions, we would have to work with the labor groups to get that through bargaining. So really, we're just looking at options and numbers. We're not making any decisions, so.
Paul?
I am a worker, so I am here, and I would say that having this process that we're discussing is gonna be very good for morale. It's gonna show our workers that we are looking at cuts as the last resort, and we're looking at all these other things. I love how thoughtful you all are towards workers' concerns, so I think that's great. So I think that this process is gonna be great for our employees to know, and they're welcome to come in and join the discussion to figure these things out. So I just want to say that I feel like this is a way of including them in it and helping morale. So
I would love to see us choose one afternoon per month that's regularly occurring. For example, if it's always the third Wednesday of every month in the afternoon, and we forego the board briefing or whatever, it'll be a lot easier to schedule that way. We could schedule the public meetings out way in advance, block our calendars way in advance. And I appreciate Rachel's suggestion about doing it regularly, starting now. Let's just move forward.
I agree with that. Did have some preliminary conversations with Commissioner Scar about taking the board briefing. We have kind of gotten into, because it is so hard to schedule, that's the first place we take. So I would want direction from the full board if we want to do that or not. I think there's some pros and cons. I can tell you, just this afternoon or earlier today, in trying to find a time for our final leadership team and board strategic plan discussion for focus areas action plans, we are looking at, there is one day in June and there is one day in July that us four are available. And I don't know if PSU is. So that is probably taken, and that doesn't even include their availability. So I think our first meeting, unless we take a board briefing time, which we can, we are into late July. So just as a data point.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I support one board briefing a month to do this.
Yeah, I think that would be useful too, and I wouldn't want to wait clear till July. We could start, we're in the middle of May or moving towards the end of May, but if we did something around
you know, about the time school is out, June 15 or 20 or somewhere in there, maybe if we could do a half day, we could at least then all agree on the format and the way forward and maybe a method to prioritize, and then who would you like to see? Maybe we could even say, okay, here's 10 things, and this one's more beneficial than this and this and this, and then we can schedule out the rest of the year or something like that, and then have some benchmarks and say, okay, you know, by the October meeting, we want to be able to say A, B, C, D, and E or something like that. And
So Doug, can I, and I hate to commit Rachel, but Rachel's really good at process.
yeah,
So would you be able to work on kind of laying out a process for us for these meetings so that we know that what we're trying to achieve each time we have a meeting? So that we know we're gonna get to where we need to at the end. Are you able to help us kind of design some?
Yeah, my initial thoughts for a first meeting, there's a lot that just keeps floating around, is we aren't talking about process for, I mean, I think we certainly have a timeline, but as far as actual ideas, the first meeting is, we aren't talking through any idea, but it is just every idea for revenue or reduction or streamline. And when I say reduction, I want to be clear, we're not just, I mean, we're not talking like, I mean, people, I think there's other ways that we can streamline and reduce costs that aren't cutting positions. And so it's just a brain dump of everything. And that's where we leave the first meeting. I don't think this is a process we want to rush or get too far ahead on anything. And then, you know, we keep honing in meeting after meeting. And I think there's work we can do in between by email or whatnot. But so that's my idea for the first meeting. But yes, I'm happy to do that. And we may even want a facilitator. You know, I think Doug is the chair role, but maybe there's a facilitator role that I could be
find
the
someone in,
facilitator,
or
or we could hire
yeah.
someone, yeah.
sure. Well, we don't have any money to pay them. That'd be nice.
Sounds like an ARPA project.
Or
Little
Commissioner
ARPA.
Black, who's very.
We can do that here, you know, there's 21 ideas on this piece of paper. And some make sense and
Oh,
some,
no problem, Laura, yeah.
yeah, and so, you know, we could easily end up with 30 or 35 things, and then half of them don't make sense, but, you know, as long as we have a method forward, and you and I can talk about that some more and come up with something. So does that work for everybody, understanding we gotta find a common time? And Commissioner Bell said, you know, our standing meeting on Wednesday afternoons, that would give over one of those, if that works, or Wednesdays generally work for you?
For me.
Okay, how about you, Ken? You're always traveling around the country.
Yeah, I would need to check my schedule. You know, with enough notice, I can move stuff around.
I would also recommend, our board briefings are only 2 hours. Is 3 hours too much? I mean, I think we can just
As long
talk.
as they're here, I think we ought to go
3 hours?
until
Yeah, I
the
agree.
end of the day.
1 to 4?
So 1 to 4 or 2 to 5?
1 to 4.
About 1:30 to 4:30.
So 1:35 to 4. Okay, so 1 to 4, and we'll get those on the calendar.
Okay.
So, we've talked about an awful lot of stuff here today. What else do we need to talk about? Well, let me ask Treasurer, you're the one that actually processes all the money. What do you have to say about what we're talking about here?
Some great ideas that are being thrown out. It'll be interesting to see which ones stick to the wall.
Okay,
Well, because I think we're also gonna need to make sure that we have help from legal counsel, so we make sure the things that we're interested in, we can run them through the legal, and potentially our auditors to run them through to make sure that that's gonna be acceptable as well. So I think I don't know whether they need to attend those meetings or whether we need to just make sure we have those resources sort of lined up to help us between meetings as we vet things.
what about some of the other counties, maybe even some cities? And Commissioner Scar, you're an incoming officer at AOC. Because that's something you could do, is find the counties that have similar difficulties and what their process is. What are they doing?
Sure, I can certainly ask around and see what we're finding, what they're doing. I know that Jackson County did a ton of research, and Joel has provided that back to us to look at, you know, these are the things they came up that were possible. So if we can find where others have done the research for what counties can and can't do, that's helpful. We can look at that.
All right, so any other bright ideas, or are you all
I have lots of bright ideas, but I did want to say, while you said something earlier about the price of asphalt, you know, we should take control of our shingle recycling program and turn those shingles into asphalt. We have the ability to do that. I think Mr. McCall started a pilot project on that. I don't know if Mr. Lady's on the line, but I don't know where that went. But you can turn asphalt shingles into road paving material. We can do that right here in the county.
Everything's on the table.
I think my question would be though, for this, are we focusing on general fund or are we going to special funds as well? I mean, the deficit that we're talking about needing to fill is a general fund deficit. So is it possible that maybe this year we're really general fund focused and maybe, you know, if this turns out to be a really successful process, as I expect it will, perhaps it's a dive into special revenue funds as well, but just thinking of our short timeline and the work in front of us.
But if there's a good idea that comes on the table, you know, we'll put a red mark by it or something, that a special fund, I wouldn't discard it there at all. That's not a bad idea. I have no idea what the magnitude would be, but, you know, maybe you save $100,000 or something, you know, I don't know.
And I agree that our priority is the general fund. I totally agree with that. And at least for the first session, I'd like it to be wide open brainstorming, because there's all kinds of good ideas that won't be in the general fund, but we can collect them.
Sure.
And maybe some of them we can take action on, or maybe we save them.
Well, I think we have a way forward, at least over the next months, and again, we got these three really, really smart people here. I gotta say that again on the record. And so, we'll wind up today then. We have a
Jay,
ballot.
did you have another comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I've heard several comments prior to this meeting about increasing TLT, and I'm just curious, is it in the pipeline or is it not, or does it need to remain on this list? And the other similar question about, we talked about, I think, the last meeting, holding off on new hires except for the sheriff's department in order for them to be into PERS. So again, are they still on this list, or is that something the commission needs to take care of? I mean, I hate to wait till October and then say, oh, well, we shouldn't fill positions, you know, before July.
Well, I don't think there's any freeze on any positions, and you can help me on this one that I'm aware of. We certainly could, but we're not to that point on anything that I know of.
I agree. Yeah.
Now, with respect to the TLT, we have had conversations, and Commissioner Bell is gonna lead some discussions with the Lodging Association, Restaurant Lodging Association. And I would say right now, we're tentatively headed towards going before the voters in May of next year, which means you have a lot of work to do in the meantime, and we've got some of the legal questions out of the way. What we don't have is the exact amount and how it would play in the cities, and a lot of the logistical and timing issues. And so I think maybe we thought we would take that up separately with the three of us and then some lodging people. But I don't know, do you want to add to that conversation?
No, we will convene a group, and if you would like to be invited to that, by all means, we'd be happy to have you there.
I just was wondering if some of these would be going forward now instead of, but that answers the question.
Now, that one seems to be a natural and easier and not necessarily an easy sell, but some very truthful stuff that it's been in place for 10 years. It's been successful. We can point to a record of all kinds of improvements that have been made. And for my part, the biggest single argument is it helps the people who come to the county and bring along with them some responsibilities that transfer to local people, meaning cops and fire departments and a lot of other things that we have to pay for, but the impacts caused by them, they ought to pay something for that. And so, to me, that's a powerful argument. Now, whether that's, you know, it's 12% instead of 10 or 15 or some number, don't know yet, but, you know, this $1 million we're talking about is based on 15%.
Right, but it sounds like it's not, we won't see it next year's budget. That's what I was trying to figure out.
Well, not necessarily. If it goes on the May primary and passes, it could go into the July 1 budget of 25, 26.
The budget that we're working toward, yeah, and we've already shown it in here as if. it were 5% and passing. So, because we've already, I think, as the county and commissioners made a commitment to vet that fully, including some polling to try to figure out what dollar amount or what percent amount to target, et
So
cetera.
then really, this could be taken off the list.
And
It's in the pipeline.
Won't need brain space from this committee necessarily, although we may run some things by this committee.
And county council is reviewing for us, is it absolutely necessary for us to go to the voters with this? Because some governments are and some governments are not. And if it's not, we could do it sooner than a year from now.
So that's still on the table.
And
Joel was
but
checking
that's
with
just
Orla's
one
attorney.
piece, it's significant, but it doesn't solve the long term, even if you had $1 million a year, that doesn't get you to 5 million or whatever over a period of time.
I think that the number of people visiting here, based on the roads, and number of trailers I see, is increasing, and it's not gonna go down.
No,
It's only gonna go up, so potentially more could be achieved. I just was wondering when the implementation was. I got the impression, but it's already in the pipeline, so that's cool. Yeah.
but there is work to be done, but the answer is yes. If things go forward and everything falls into place, it would be on the ballot next May, and there'd be a process to tell voters why it would make sense, and it's a measure of fairness and equity and all of those things, and if they support it, then it's ready to go. If not, then, you go to a plan B, whatever plan B is, which might be ugly.
And Rachel, you looked like you had a comment on that.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I would recommend that it stays on the table, in this discussion, because at least my vision is that this is our revenue strategy package, and people need to see all the pieces. And I think, it will help sell to the voters, if it goes before the voters, the need for TLT and what it's paying for, and then what our other ideas are for paying for other services, and it's just the whole picture. And I would be interested to get, the public's opinion, continue talking through this group, on what we're doing with the TLT, because we still don't know exactly what that looks like.
I
I don't
agree.
think it's gonna be we need as much, time spent on it, but it certainly should be on the table as an item that we're working through, because we're still working through it.
I agree with that, and also the discussion of what the additional million will be used for specifically, because, the prior one was sold for a specific reason, and this is not gonna be for a specific reason, and I think that needs some input on what that's gonna be.
Okay, anything else that we would like to visit today? Well, I'll thank you again then for your service on the compensation and what you're doing here, and for making a commitment, going forward, because, we all have X amount of time, and if you're willing to give us another half day every month, that's a good thing. And from my mind, that's kind of what makes things work in this county, is people step up and do their thing. So thank you very much, and with that, we will adjourn at 4:02.
To everyone.
I was poking around.
Hey, MJ, in relation to some of the housing questions you have, I would encourage you to get connected back with Sarah and have her connect you with our housing coordinator, who can talk to you about the things that are going on related to a lot of the housing questions that you have. Because we have a housing commission that's working on a lot of those pieces. So we're currently have our development code open to set the opportunity to have cottage clusters.